Muchísimas gracias, señora vicepresidenta. Thank you very much. Mrs. President, Excellencies, it is my honor to address the Human Rights Council on behalf of the Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls to present our thematic report, Escalating Backlash Against Gender Equality and Urgency of Reaffirming Substantive Equality and the Human Rights of Women and Girls, as well as the reports on our country visits to Mauritania and Malta. I would also like to take this opportunity to sincerely thank the governments of the Dominican Republic and Thailand for their invitation to undertake a visit to their countries this year, and note with regret that the visit to Thailand had to be postponed due to the liquidity crisis. Mrs. President, despite advancements, no country in the world has achieved full gender equality. Women and girls continue to face discrimination in all spheres of their lives, frequently starting within their families and communities. 6 years ago, in 2018, the Working Group warned about the resurgence of a conservative and retrogressive narrative in international fora and at the national level, accompanied by attempts to reinstate policies or legislation that are harmful to women and girls, especially in the areas of family life and bodily autonomy. Today, it is with the greatest concern that the Working Group observes that the backlash against women's and girls' human rights is intensifying and has reached extreme proportions in certain countries. Retrogressive movements are jeopardizing women's and girls' human rights, as well as the progress achieved in advancing gender equality in all regions of the world. As a result, the world is witnessing a growing backlash against sexual and reproductive health rights, including comprehensive education on sexual and reproductive health, ever-present misogynistic statements in the media, and the rise of anti-gender discourse in the public domain, as well as attacks on women and girl human rights defenders. Afghanistan is an extreme example of gender backlash. The pattern of large-scale, systematic violations of women's and girls' fundamental rights in Afghanistan by the discriminatory and misogynistic edicts, policies, and harsh enforcement methods of the Taliban constitutes an institutionalized framework of apartheid based on gender and merits an unequivocal response. As the Working Group continues its work in a new composition since last November, it will keep on monitoring the situation in Afghanistan from a gendered perspective and to focus on counteracting the escalating gender backlash globally through all its working methods. At the same time, as an overarching framework, it will develop an understanding of substantive equality for women and girls and the concrete implications that it holds for states and other actors in the face of contemporary challenges. Substantive equality requires not only ensuring de facto equality between women and men and girls and boys, but also committing to a conception of transformative equality. In other words, the transformation of elements of society, culture, politics, and the economy that create barriers to equality. The principle of substantive equality is central to the international human rights framework and to human dignity. It requires addressing discrimination in laws, policies, and practices, redressing disadvantage, addressing stigma, providing reasonable accommodations for the particular needs of women and girls, combating harmful stereotypes, prejudice, and violence, adopting positive measures when necessary, and making the structural changes needed for women and girls to fully participate in all areas of life. On the basis of that framework, the Working Group will devote its annual thematic reports and other analysis to identifying and addressing the specific challenges to the advancement of substantive gender equality in all spheres of life. It will do so with renewed dedication and a focused recognition of the various intersectional identities of women and girls. More specifically, Your Excellencies, the next annual reports of the Working Group will focus on the thematic areas of gender dimensions of the care and support system, gender equality in our digital lives, and gender justice in post-conflict situations. As the world faces increasing demands for care owing to changes in family structures, aging societies, increase in women's employment in certain countries, and the impacts of climate change, the Working Group will examine more closely current challenges and policy approaches to the global care crisis with a view to promoting a human rights-based, feminist, intersectional approach to care, one that is conducive to greater gender equality. Moreover, as digital technologies are affected by social, economic, and political factors, it is crucial to recognize and address the distinct effects of digitalization on women and girls and pursue an intentionally gender-responsive approach to the design and implementation of digital technology, including artificial intelligence. The working group will explore discrimination against women and girls in the digital sphere and the impact of current and future developments on their rights, well-being, and potential. Furthermore, as post-conflict reconstruction and recovery efforts significantly underfund women's priorities and women and girls continue to be sidelined in peace processes, a gendered analysis of post-conflict needs is crucial to the sustainability of peace-building and reconstruction efforts and to addressing the structural conditions that make women vulnerable to violence and other human rights violations during conflicts. The working group will examine women's and girls' access to substantive justice in transitional phases. Mrs. President, Excellencies, the realization of substantive gender equality cannot be further delayed. Humanity is in the midst of a backlash aimed at curtailing the equal enjoyment by women and girls of their rights in all major areas of life. Active resistance to gender equality has been identified as among the key factors explaining the slow progress and, in some cases, even reversals of gains made in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. The status quo that fails to fulfill the human rights and fundamental freedoms of half of humanity in the world is unacceptable. States must work together to build substantive gender equality as required under international human rights law. Other actors, such as those in the private sector, international economic institutions, should support these efforts and respect and protect women's and girls' rights, especially those in the most marginalized and vulnerable conditions. The report includes recommendations to states to counter the gender backlash, eliminate discrimination against women and girls in the family, culture, the economy, politics, and sexual and reproductive health rights, and commit to achieving substantive gender equality. Finally, the working group highlights the transformative force of millions of women and girls worldwide and of their movements and allies that strive to advance women's and girls' rights, resist pushbacks, and build just, inclusive, peaceful, and sustainable societies for all. They are an inspiration to us and the main reason for hope and optimism for the future. Mrs. President, Excellencies, allow me now to turn to some observations relating to the country visits undertaken. The working group visited Mauritania from 25 September to 6 October 2023. We would like to reiterate our gratitude to the government of Mauritania for its invitation and full cooperation in facilitating this visit. Mauritania has taken commendable steps towards gender equality by strengthening its institutional, political, and legal framework. At the same time, the working group has observed that Mauritanian women face barriers to meaningful participation in political decision-making, and they are severely underrepresented in the law enforcement, judicial, and legal sectors. The gender gap in labor force participation in Mauritania remains stark, with only 26.4% of women participating. Land and house ownership among Mauritanian women remain at extremely low levels. Mauritania has made notable strides in enhancing access to education for women and girls, although much remains to be achieved. Despite some progress made, maternal mortality rates in Mauritania remain among the highest in the world. The working group is alarmed by the high rates of teenage pregnancy, child marriage, which is permitted by law with minimal restrictions, forced marriage, and polygamy, which is also legal. The working group commends the prohibition by law of female genital mutilation. Nevertheless, the general prevalence of the practice remains very high. The working group urges the government to continue building momentum for the adoption of a comprehensive law on gender-based violence and to strengthen the draft law in line with international standards. Overall, Mauritania has much potential and should accelerate its efforts in realizing it. We have identified additional challenges and formulated recommendations, which we hope will assist the government in their effort to eliminate discrimination against women and girls in the country. Allow me now to turn to some observations relating to the country visit to Malta. The working group visited Malta from 26 June to 7 July 2023. We want to reiterate our appreciation to the government of Malta for its invaluable support in facilitating this visit. Malta has made significant strides in several aspects of gender equality, especially women's economic participation as well as educational attainment. The country has a comprehensive legal, policy, and institutional framework for the protection and promotion of women's and girls' human rights. The working group congratulates Malta for its achievement as regional champion for LGBTQI+ rights. At the same time, Malta still faces considerable challenges, including deep-rooted gender stereotypes, the persistent underrepresentation of women in leadership positions, the need for improved work-life balance, the prevalence of violence against women, and the existence of a gender and pension pay gap. While the working group welcomes the increased national dialogue about women's and girls' sexual and reproductive health rights observed at the time of the visit, it is deeply concerned that Malta continues to have the most restrictive abortion law in the European Union. Malta benefits from a vibrant civil society which needs to be further supported. The working group is concerned about the intimidating environment surrounding the debate on sexual and reproductive health rights, as well as online and offline attacks against women activists and journalists. By challenging and transcending harmful traditional gender roles and expectations, Malta can unlock the potential of all persons and create a society where equality thrives. We hope that the findings and recommendations presented in our report will support the government's efforts towards gender equality. We look forward also to engaging with other member states in the future and would like to encourage positive responses to our requests for country visits. I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to a constructive dialogue with all of you. Thank you so much.